Julian McKenzie, how are you, buddy?
Doing good. I have to say, I'm not a camping person.
No,
I'm not.
we're gonna get you hiking.
Hiking is cool. Here's what I think about camping, and I realize I'm gonna alienate a lot of people out west here, but I'm cool with being out in nature and the hikes and seeing animals and being around the flora and the fauna. I'm cool with that. The minute we have to start sleeping in tents and having the mosquitoes biting you around, that's where you lose me. Like, we can do all of that fun stuff that comes with camping, and you could go to a chalet or a cottage that has indoor plumbing at the end of the night. Like, what's wrong with that?
Oh, you lost me at cottage.
Sorry. Cottage, chalet. Like, I say chalet, or you get an Airbnb up north somewhere, and you like.
I'm with you. For the record, I mean, that is you being Western Canadian, I assume, and not liking the word cottage.
No, it's too easy.
Okay, it's too easy. All right. Well, clearly, of all three of us here, if one person's going to kill an animal for food, it's her.
If you haven't woken up in the middle of Saskatchewan on Crown land with a cow at the door of your tent and like an alarming amount of ticks on the outside netting, you're not doing it right.
Yeah, but like, here's my thing. Why do I need to do that?
Fun.
What do I need to prove to anybody that I can do that? Like, I feel comfortable enough in myself that I don't need to prove to anybody.
If Julian was the main character in Hatchet, he would not have survived.
I don't know what that is.
You haven't read Hatchet?
No.
What did you do in grade 7?
Go through awkwardness, puberty.
We have big sports things to talk about, guys.
We should.
I need to bring us back. Let's start with, honestly, probably the biggest story of the week. Julian, it is the 4th inning of our slow pitch game. I am playing.
How many times have you heard about this, Kevin?
I am playing shortstop, but I have moved
probably heard
over.
about this enough. You told her this enough.
I have not actually told her the story.
Oh,
I'm
my
just curious.
God.
I need you to describe what happens. I have sort of shifted to sort of behind second base. I'm sort of just in the outfield. I wasn't worried about the ground ball going through, and there's a blooper. Tell the people what happened.
I'm so mad you're making me do this. This ball is up in the air.
I love being the host.
He is chasing this down, and the ball is almost about to go over his head, and he does the little breadbasket catch as he's sliding to the ground and actually makes a nice snag. It was actually a pretty nice snag.
And I kid you not, Willie Mays was waving down to me from the heavens.
Okay, you don't need to go that far.
It was
bring Willie Mays into this.
Hey,
it's not Willie Mays.
It was honestly, it was a highlight of the season.
By the way, we were losing at that point.
We got crushed.
It was a bad game.
It was a bad game, and it was raining, and we forced them to play despite they were up 20 runs on us, and we forced them to play the last inning. At which point they mercied us, and we went 3 up, 3 down. It was the most pointless inning that's ever been played. But I made a really sick catch. Julian,
Danny thought he was Benny the Jet Rodriguez, but he was actually Smalls.
Dude, this is honestly though, we're gonna stop talking about it, but like it was legitimately sick. The other team like applauded me.
Oh my God.
Oh wow, Jeff Hamilton just congratulated him on my ad reads. What up, Jeff? We got
shout out to you with the ad reads, but also, have you ever had to do a Manscaped ad read?
No, but
you don't know anything about ad reads. Don't worry about that.
No, to be honest, I prior to last week had never done an ad read.
Oh, really?
Anyways, we're getting great interaction. We got Solemn Valji. It's basically just media people and then Cami's man chiming in.
Hi, Dylan.
But he got hit by a truck today.
What?
Or his truck got hit by a truck.
What?
Yeah.
Is he okay?
Yeah.
I mean, relatively speaking.
Yeah. He's here.
Wait, he's in the studio?
No,
like
he's in the chat room.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's functioning.
Yeah.
I mean,
his thumbs work.
Okay. All right. Sorry about what happened.
On that, I mean, I actually don't really know what happened. I haven't seen him in like a week or probably more. But who's this Craig Conroy fella I've heard so much about?
Yeah, I don't know. We should talk about him.
What do you think was what was your number one takeaway that made you feel like, okay, I understand the direction that Craig is going from yesterday?
I just kind of like the energy and vibrance. I guess that's really a thing that matters that he kind of brought to that press conference, but also the fact that he was pretty direct about a few things. He said, you know what, maybe we're not going to full on change pieces of the core and it seems like he's intending on competing for a playoff spot. But the fact that he wants to see more youth in the lineup, I think for a lot of people in this market, that is a refreshing breath air. Wow.
Breath of fresh air.
Wow. Could just English. Okay. Breath
The
of fresh
wildfire
air.
smoke is still in his brain.
Yeah. Seriously.
I mean, the catch is still in his brain. He can't stop thinking
Oh
about it.
my God. It's been a long day, people. But all that to say, I think in terms of the vision that Craig Conroy kind of laid out for everybody, it seemed like he was saying the right things.
So,
and I think a lot of people were happy about that.
I don't not interrupt, but I
Go
mean,
ahead.
he did say he thinks they can compete.
Yes.
With the caveat that they will not go into this. He said they can compete as currently built, but 7 UFAs going into the next season is
There's going to be
too many.
changes.
And I mean, I felt like the implication there was he was like, if we can't sign these guys, we're trading them, right?
Yeah.
And that goes for all of them. Now, he very specifically said Lindholm. He said he knew what was going on there, which I'm not trying to put words into his mouth, but I do think there have been changes with the coaching, changes with a lot. Possibly Lindholm has changed his tune a little bit.
I think this was a press conference where you could read between the lines, because that moment, and when he was asked about what he wants in a head coach, and the first thing he brings up is having someone who's, on the same page and not being at odds. I don't know about you. That is pretty much a clapback at the previous regime, which Brad Treliving and Daryl Sutter at different points were not on the same page.
It could not have been more clear, though. Like, he literally, like, it was very much.
He spelled that out for everybody.
The most important thing is he was like, we are not at odds. Sometimes we're not going to agree, but we are working together.
Yes.
And given everything that we have that's been rumored that's about what happened with Sutter and Treliving, I think that was as clear as day what he was saying. And I mean, we'll talk about the head coaching options, but I sort of want to stay on this track a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that look, whether it's Toffoli, whether it's Lindholm, whether it's Tanev, Hanifin, any one of those guys, my impression was that if they're not signed by the start of the regular season, he's dealing them.
And there's no reason why they can't get
assets,
postseason ready assets, like players who could help you, still like take a run. And like, honestly, the Flames are going to bounce back. I think they're going to make the playoffs this season.
It depends if those 7 guys, if you have to trade, like if you're trading Lindholm, trading Hanifin.
The thing that I took away from Conroy's press conference, obviously, like, there's really rose-colored glasses at the start of a new era like this. The fan reaction is really overwhelmingly positive. You cannot mistake Conroy's gregarious nature for weakness. So as great as he is at telling stories, as comfortable as he makes people feel around him, he's going to be a straight shooter. And I do think that players and other people around the league will enjoy working with that. And it looks like, genuinely, like, I mean, he was obviously a guy who was captain material as a player. It looks like he's just building or preparing to build kind of a team of his own. He's willing to split the workload and say, I'll be on the road for these things, but there's times where Dave Nonis or Brad Pascal, someone else will have to step in and take a look at these people. So it's really, and the other thing he said, like, we need a captain. This is Conroy saying, like, we have a leadership group, but I got the C. Ultimately, here's the final say. So I do think that, like, it's going to bring a very different atmosphere, but he'll be playing it hard and straight.
He said that he would be more collaborative than Treliving was. And I actually don't think that was meant as a criticism. He just said there are different leadership styles.
Absolutely.
His is more collaborative. Tree liked to do things on his own a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It legitimately, I didn't sense any negativity in what he was saying about Brad. But I also, like, I genuinely don't think that Craig Conroy was as committed to this team making the playoffs next year. I think he repeated, as built, we can make the playoffs. But he also very much was saying we're not going to be the same team in 4 months as we are right now.
You also said with Lindholm is a guy you build around, right? And I wonder, like, I think Lindholm is the biggest domino of all the pending UFAs. Like, if Tyler Toffoli, look, I think he's a great player. If he says you know what, I'm going to take my talent somewhere else, you trade him at the max value, that's a different story. Elias Lindholm is your number 1 center. If you trade away Elias Lindholm, you have to consider the direction of your team.
Is he your best asset as a whole?
I think so. I think so. Yeah. Like,
in terms of the return you get, absolutely.
How many other pieces? Yeah. How many other of the UFAs can you look at and think, if you're the Flames, do we have a shot at getting a first-round pick in this year's draft for him? Mm-hmm. I think Elias Lindholm is the best possible asset for that. I still think I had a mailbag for the Athletic drop today, and I was asked, is there a possibility that the Flames could possibly get a first-round pick that's higher than what they have right now for Elias Lindholm? I would still be very stunned if a team in the top 10 felt they were an Elias Lindholm away to trade out of what's supposed to be a stacked top-heavy class to make that happen. So even if Elias would commit to that team long term, but if you find yourself in a position where you can, get a first round pick, even if it's from like a St. Louis or a Nashville who have multiple first round picks, like I think it's something you definitely take into account. But also if you're intending on competing, what's the contingency plan?
It could be like, I mean, where's Ottawa drafting?
I think they're top 10.
A team like that potentially that is on the rise, but hasn't quite broken out yet. I can see them potentially being, but even then, I mean, you're giving up a top 10 pick.
Seriously,
for a guy in his late 20s.
Yeah.
Like, even if his contract's good, like I think you're more looking at a first round pick for next season that you might be able to get, which is okay. But I mean,
or
because Conroy was optimistic, right?
Absolutely. I think so.
He did not say, we got to talk and then I'll make a decision on what to do. He said, I believe he wants to be a Calgary Flame. I've got to talk to him.
If you're the Flames and one of those teams, say from like 25 to the end, have the first round pick and they're like, hey, we could start a deal there, and you still get a first round pick, even if it's lower, is that worth it? This draft class is supposed to be stacked.
Sometimes you have 2 first round picks then that you're bringing into the organization. If you're getting nothing in return, like if the alternative is that he's going to walk next year, and
you have to consider it.
You have to consider it. I mean, it's a first line center. It's an elite 2-way center. I think I want more than that.
You absolutely should ask for more than that. I think a first round pick could be a starting point, a prospect. I would love a roster player in that deal too. I think you should. I'm not saying you should ask for the heaven, moon, and stars for Elias Lindholm, but if you are at that point, and especially if you may still want to compete with the roster that you have, like you kind of look at the framework that was done for Tkachuk, and I'm not saying you're getting the same return, but like I think something in that vein. You need players in return who are going to help you at least compete for next season. That's what I think you're doing if you're looking at the roster and you're saying, okay, we want to compete. If you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, Lindholm wants to leave and a few other guys in that UFA pile want to leave, then you're starting to say, okay, more draft picks, more draft capital. Like I think you're looking at it that way.
I mean, I think that if you look at that list of guys, I mean, I don't think, given his injury history, like Chris Tanev, you're not signing for more than 1 year at a time going forward, right? Maybe 2 years. Like he's probably going to be a guy. I love Chris Tanev as a player. I love what he brings to the organization. I think he's a perfect second pairing guy, but he misses a lot of games, so there's no way he is getting signed long term. So I'm not sure what sort of value he has on the trade market before. I think at the trade deadline, if you're 6 points out of a playoff spot, there are going to be teams that want to bring in Chris Tanev.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure he's a guy this offseason you're necessarily getting a ton for. Am I right about that? Am I wrong about that?
No, I can understand that. I don't think you're getting the same amount of attention for Chris Tanev compared to a Lindholm, a Tyler Toffoli, if it gets to that point, a Noah Hannafin, especially. I think regardless of what...
I think you can fleece some Hannafin.
I think regardless of whether or not he wants to come back, and I think he was one of those players who kind of made it not necessarily clear, but I think he was more open to coming back compared to a Lindholm or a Backlund. I think you look at him as a trade candidate regardless, because look, the Flames are very close to the salary cap limit, and I think they're going to need to alleviate some salary. And I think you look at a guy like Noah Hannafin, who's due for a raise next summer, and you think, okay, what are our options here? Are we able to get a cheaper piece back that could help our team? I think he's someone you look at.
And I mean, going back to Chris Tanev, it also depends, like when you're looking at a trade, what is a team hoping they get out of a player like that? Because for me, one of the greatest things that Chris Tanev has brought to this team is bringing along defensemen who maybe weren't so sound. Noah Hannafin was like, I think a lot of fans were pretty ready to give up on him before he got put on a pairing with Chris Tanev, and his game changed a lot. And you can say the same for Oliver Shillington. And now since then, we've seen Hannafin be able to find more success playing with other defensive partners. So I think Chris Tanev brings a lot of value that way. If you maybe have some younger D-men that you're hoping can, or a D-man who just needs a little more shoring up, to have a kind of partner like that who is such a great teacher of the game.
And I'm sure that what Tanev would say is, if you're deal me to a contender, right? Yep. Like there's 1 year left on my contract. Like, but I fully agree that I actually think, like, I mean, that's why that may be his greatest value to the Stampede or the Flames. I apologize. Doing both.
You're in the CFL brain, man.
Man, I'm going back and forth day to day. It's crazy, but yeah, no, I actually do agree with you. I have a feeling Tanev wouldn't be super enthusiastic about getting dealt to a team that's sort of rebuilding at this point, right? So it's interesting. I mean,
They can't make everyone happy.
No, and it's not their responsibility to make everyone happy. You're 100% right. And then Toffoli, I sort of agree with you. I mean, I don't know what you get for Toffoli. He's clearly a really good hocky player.
Yeah,
he's going to score goals for you.
He's coming off a career season.
Yeah.
Like if he were to be like, you know what, man, I want to go play on a contending team, like you're trading him at max value. Like absolutely. And you could possibly do that. I also wonder, I mean, we're talking a lot about Elias Lindholm and the talk of captaincy is coming up, and people are saying like, hey man, you know, you re-signed Michael Backlund, you give him the C. Do you do that? Maybe this is an unpopular take.
I'm just curious, when did the tide turn on that opinion? Because it felt like for so much of the past season, people were screaming for it to be Backlund. Now all of a sudden it's like Rasmus Anderson all day, every day. And I heard Andrew Mangiapane's name thrown out there.
Yeah,
like, if you're going to Mangiapane, why are you not talking Coleman?
Yeah, I was surprised to hear Andrew Mangiapane's name. Blake Coleman, I think, was someone I would think would be a little bit more above Mangiapane. No disrespect to him, he's a hell of a player, but I think Mangiapane can, you know, give him a little bit more time. Maybe you give him an A before you think about giving him a C. But my thing with Michael Backlund is this: he's not getting any younger. I think he wants to play on a contending team. He's coming off like a really great season. I don't know if it's going to get any better for Michael Backlund. And I understand that he has played 900 plus games for this organization, and he means so much to the city and the work that he's done in the community. He's the team's nominee for the King Clancy Award. Like he is a guy who I gave him a Selke vote this year. This was a really good year for Michael Backlund. But I wonder, just at the point that he's at right now in his career, do you move on? At the very least, considering where he's at in his career.
I think he's also a player where I don't think fans held a lot of ill will against Jerome McGinley when he said, I want a cup. They're like, go get it. Go get it, Iggy. And I think people would feel the same way about Backlund. It's like, yeah, you know, you gave us your all. So go get one.
We agree that Backlund should have been made captain the second Jordan.
Absolutely.
Right? And I think that Conroy has said that was a mistake. So
I think he should have been captain.
Should be the question of whether he should be captain now, after he's publicly stated that he's not sure he can win a Stanley Cup here. And I'm not criticizing him for that.
I think he's got every right to say that.
But I think that's part of what made him captain material. A big part of that role is being the speaker for the players. That's probably why like a Chris Tanev and I think an Andrew Mangiapane might not be the world's greatest choice, because it's like those interviews aren't something they enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to be those guys. That's like fine if you're still like an A, because that speaks to a different kind of leadership in the room. But that's where like a Backlund and a Coleman, who were voted like the Peter Marr good guys this year. Like,
and they are good guys
because they're really effective communicators as well. And that's a big part of that role, just with the way the NHL
I don't mind Rasmus
he'd also be good. He's got some piss and vinegar in him.
And like, again,
I think McKenzie Weegar should be thrown in that category too. I know he's a newer guy, but it seems as if already he's gotten guys to kind of gravitate around him. Like one thing I remember from earlier this year is, I think it was in the Minnesota game or the Dallas game. It was like when Jacob Markstrom was starting to come back. I think it was in the Minnesota game, but there was that shot of McKenzie Weegar on the bench with the bucket like backwards. It was kind of like a funny like rally cat. It's kind of funny stuff like that teammates kind of notice and kind of enjoy around him. I don't know if he's necessarily captain material. I would put him as dark horse for that honor, but like I think he could be in line for some kind of A next year, some kind of leadership role.
I think, I think it was, and I'm sort of segueing here a little bit, but I thought it was notable that Conroy brought up when Weegar said they needed a new arena. Clearly, that resonated around the Saddle Dome.
Absolutely.
And their staff.
Even Zadorov said like the day that they made the announcement of the deal in principle, Weegar was the main character in the group chat that day.
Yep.
Yep. It was, I don't think it's at all surprising that, you know, a guy at CSEC in that role was championing the importance of a new arena. That's a part of the job, but I was very surprised because when Weegar said that, we all sort of raised our eyebrows, but there were bigger issues to talk about. And clearly, that was a big deal within the Flames, right? That
it's not like we directly asked him, hey man, can you like dump on the arena for us, please? Like he brought that up. He made that a thing. And then days later, obviously the arena deal gets announced. So like he threw that out there into the ether.
He volunteered it.
He put that out there and we were all taken aback by that, rightfully so. Yeah.
It's kind of funny because you go back to summer when he first came here, the Flames put out that video of him walking into the room for the first time to get his jersey, and they just got roasted. roasted online for the state of the facility. So
I mean,
it's kind of funny that he's the guy who, like almost a year later.
I mean, of course, like no disrespect, but like you look at the home locker room for the Flames. I don't know how many people have seen that video or how many people realize the state of it. It's not like there are visitors' locker rooms that look better than the home locker room for the Flames. It's embarrassing.
They actually updated it before.
The visitors' locker room at the Saddle Dome objectively looks better than the Flames' own room.
I haven't been in the room past the Flames room though, right? Like there's the room beyond it, which seems significant.
Like which direction? Like towards security or towards the Ed Whalen room?
Well, just where they go after they take off their gear, and then there's a huge room in the back, right? Which is where they all actually go. So
yeah,
I don't
maybe
know
that looks fun. Maybe
but
that's
in the
fine.
visitors room, there's no one who sits. There's one stall in the Flames room, and there's a speaker in the way. So there's everyone's picture, their headshot is above their stall. There's one where the picture has to be on a different level because there's a speaker, and there's about a foot of space between the edge of the stall, like the little bench there, and wall.
Do you remember when Matthew Coronado joined the team, and for like a good stretch of time, at the beginning when it was unveiled, he had a stall, but then after that, his stuff was on like a moving like crate thing. Like, I'm sorry, that's not. You're an NHL team. If that's what you're about, I think that's embarrassing. And I think if you're McKenzie Weegar and you're those guys in the locker room and, everything already is not ideal with how your season is going, and then you're looking at your locker room and that's what you have to play in, no wonder the environment wasn't all that great.
Well, and Conroy said yesterday, because I do want to get back to some of what he said, Conroy specifically said having the best arena in the league will make a difference in terms of
absolutely
attracting free agents and all of that. So that was good. I want to just read you a Conroy quote, because it was the moment where I was like, I don't really know how to write a story about this, but I think it's significant. Offensively, I'd like to see us be more creative from the red line in. If you watch practice and see the amazing things these guys do nowadays, I want them to be creative. I want them to freewheel and do what they do. You know what? You're going to turn pucks over and then you back check. And then from the red line back, I want structure. I think you have to have structure. People can't be indecisive in the D zone. They have to play with structure and purpose. First of all, feels like a direct shot at Daryl Sutter's entire style of play. Was that not, just as someone who covers this team, both of you guys who watch this team, covers this team, is there all the time? That's exactly what you want to hear from the GM, right? That for me was,
because I found especially creativity was a bit of an issue. I think we saw all the overtime and the shootout losses is where we did start to see a lot of that come into play. But it was also what really spoke to me was, you mentioned it earlier, his quote about getting a little bit younger. Because I noticed particularly one of the last games against the Anaheim Ducks, it was like the speed that the Ducks had for what they were this year. The speed was an issue for the Flames. And there were a couple of young teams where they were just the kids were fast. They couldn't keep up, and with speed would bring some more room for creativity.
Well, and I think that it's the combination of that, and it's also bringing out the best in your skilled players. And I think that this year, look, I actually have a lot of respect for Jonathan Huberdeau and the way he took accountability and came out and took responsibility for his play. I mean, he never passed the buck. He was, I think all of us who interviewed him, you can't help but be impressed with him as a human for the way he took responsibility. But the reality is, there was not a moment this season where he looked to me like a top 25 NHL player.
There was one moment, and it came in preseason.
Did it, eh?
It was the play where he took the puck off the boards, made a spin move, brought the puck up ice, and then Toffoli and Lindholm were at the finishing end of that play. That was in preseason. That was how many months ago when we all saw that play, we all thought, okay, this is what we expected when Jonathan Huberdeau was acquired by the Calgary Flames. And since that play, we have not really seen it. To your point, you're right. We have not seen anything that would make him look like a top 25 player.
Well, and then Kadri's, I think his greatest play of the season came in the second game against Edmonton.
In Edmonton. Yep.
They broke Brett Kulak's ankles.
It's kind of wild, but there was that stretch of games being played at the beginning of the year where the Flames, they might not have been perfect, but they were getting wins over quality teams. And you thought, okay, well, they'll figure it out. And if they keep up these wins, they're going to be in good shape. And then after that Pittsburgh win, everything just went off the rails.
So I think when we're talking about bringing more creativity into the system, we have to start talking about the coach.
Yes.
Should we maybe do, Danny, I know you're very into The Bachelor. franchise. Should we do this like
You're a
Rose
Bachelor
style?
fan?
Oh yeah, I'm okay.
Him and
Hold up.
Solemn like themed columns around the
So,
Bachelor.
shout out-
I'm a Bachelor fan too, because like
I've never seen a full episode.
Before we do it,
really.
shout out to the homie KQ, who's being great in the group chat. Just want to very quickly do that.
Yes, sir.
Also, with The Bachelor, to be honest, Bachelor in Paradise is my jam. Bachelor and Bachelorette is just scouting for paradise.
I'm the opposite. I can't get behind Bachelor in Paradise. I'm all about watching Bachelor.
I watch it with my homie Brett, lead singer
Shout
of
out
the Beatty
Brett.
Boys or the Beta Boys. June 2nd, album release party at Commonwealth. Check it out. Going to be
Yes,
the
sir.
party of the summer.
You out here
But
plugging, man.
I got to. It's my boy.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, so yes, present to me this Bachelor game that we are going to play.
Do you give Kirk Muller a rose?
Are we saying as head coach?
I'd say okay. We'll say we got three positions. We got three positions here. We'll talk about head coach to associate coaches just to keep it simple for now.
Okay.
All right. But if we're talking about first impressions, just rose to go to the next round and maybe talk about it a little more deeply. Do you give Kirk Muller a rose?
As an assistant coach? I will say, like, yes, presumably I have a lot of time for Kirk Muller. Now, he was responsible for the power play this year. I do think that the power play is something that I would like to see improve for the Flames. Like, the hard part about this whole project, but I want to keep going with it, I'm not saying that, is that, like, ultimately the head coach is going to pick a staff. So it's sort of like you got to start with who do we think is head coach. But Muller, yeah, I'd like to see Muller. I'm not going to say we should fire anyone. That's my problem.
Yeah, fair.
I think with Kirk Muller, like I feel like at this point it's got to be head coach or bust, right? Unless the person you're bringing in from the outside is like Peter Laviolette or Gerard Gallant. Like, would Kirk Muller want to be an assistant for Ryan Huska, Mitch Love? I have questions about that. Also, if you look at some of the other vacancies that are out there, I know Mike Babcock's getting looks in Columbus, but does Columbus, if they realize, no thanks with Mike Babcock, do they look at a Mitch Love? Do they look at Kirk Muller? Kirk Muller is the only man on that staff right now with Calgary who has head coaching experience in the NHL. Like, I mean, say what you want about how he handled the power play. I'm with you. I think that really needs a change. But I think for a guy like Kirk Muller, if he were to put himself out there as a free agent, I think someone would take a look at him. I don't not necessarily saying he would be guaranteed to get a head coaching job, but
He'd get interviews.
he'd get interviews. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do I give him a rose?
Again, with the premise of the rose being like
On to the next round of interviews.
Okay, so like, what's the pool? Like, what? Like, how
I'm just
many?
kidding. I should have made that analogy. I've never seen The Bachelor.
Because here's the thing. I think
Like,
we
yeah,
need.
I'm
Here's the
giving
thing. I
Kirk
think
Muller
we
a
need. You know what I think we need? We need like a pool of people, and then from that pool of people, you dwindle it down to a certain number, and then you get to like the final two or something.
we all have, I'm assuming, Ryan Huska and Mitch Love on our.
Yeah, the thing that
These
are my
the
short
thing
list.
that I wonder about with Mitch Love, just with the incredible amount of success that he has seen in a very short period of time at the AHL level, if he doesn't get the nod for a head coaching job in Calgary, obviously like teams are going to look on him, but does he take that jump? Like, is there a world where he's an associate coach with the Flames first? Is that even something that's more appealing to him than the gig he currently has now?
Ryan
looked
Pike
at it
has
the
added
opposite
that
way.
per Elliot Friedman, Muller has been interviewed by Columbus and one other team.
Okay, so see,
Thank you,
yeah,
Ryan Pike.
yeah. I just want to say I'm looking at it the opposite way. If a team like Columbus is already doing interviews with guys like Kirk Muller, what's stopping them from doing interviews with guys like Mitch Love? And if a team like Columbus is getting real serious with a guy like Mitch Love, and you're the Flames and you're still trying to figure your situation out, and you really want him involved, what does that do with your situation? Do you say, okay, you know what, man, just pursue that opportunity. Maybe we just go with Ryan Huska, we go with someone else. Or if you're Craig Conroy and you're really into Mitch Love, you just say, to hell with the process. You sign him on the spot and you keep him in Calgary.
He did say, paraphrasing a little bit, but he'd be down with a greener coach.
Yeah, he did say that. I know some other people were saying that maybe there would be some hesitancy over the Flames having a first-time GM and maybe a first-time head coach, but I think there would be much less hesitancy over that if that first-time head coach was someone internal who is very familiar with the roster and the makeup of this team.
It's interesting hearing like Muller and Babcock for Columbus, just two very different styles, because I almost wonder if like teams would look at a Mike Babcock and compare him to a Sutter to be like, doesn't really work with today's players now,
Yeah.
especially considering the way things ended for him in Toronto.
I mean, look, we're in a world now where people like Joel, it's a completely different situation, but people like Joel Quenneville are being put up in this situation for jobs. Like, I think for NHL teams, and for better or for worse, they think, okay, we want a winner behind the bench. We want to get the best possible person, quote unquote, to lead our team to glory and all that. And if you have a shred of talent, despite whatever transgressions have happened in the past, you are going to get looked at those jobs. And that's why Mike Babcock's name's being peddled around. And that's why Stan Bowman's name was thrown around for the GM role here in Calgary. And Joel Quenneville, a lot of people are saying, oh, is he going to go to the Rangers or is he going to go somewhere else? Like, his name's out there.
So do you guys think Mitch Love should be, like, if you were handicapping it, the front runner? I don't know how handicaps work. We keep just picking ways of talking about this.
I don't know if there's an obvious front runner. Here's my thing with Mitch. I think in a perfect world, if you're Calgary, you let Mitch follow what happened with Ryan Huska and Cale McLean, where they come up from junior, they become the HL head coach, and then they become an assistant behind the bench for the Flames. Like, I feel like it would be a really good way to ease in a guy like Mitch Love.
Because there's a huge benefit with having the experience with those Wrangler players that Craig Conroy would like to see more of the youth in the lineup.
Totally.
At the same time, you do have some battle-worn veterans where it's like, all right, how would a Huberdeau or a Kadri work with Mitch Love, telling them what to do? Because by all accounts, like, Mitch Love isn't, I wouldn't say, it's hard to say, he's not like I wouldn't say he's not a player's coach, but he's got a hard-nosed style as well.
But
it's
also,
very blue-collar work pale type stuff.
But also, I don't know if you've been to some of his practices in the AHL.
They look like they're having fun.
They look like they're having so much fun. And it's one thing to just be like, all right, you know what, you take your moment of practice and you just kind of chat with your boys and whatever. We have guys who are like hooting and hollering and whatever and hugging people in practice and stuff. And he is all about playing with emotion, and he wants his guys to play with emotion. And one thing I think about how his practices go, and I think about how Craig Conroy wants to make the environment more fun around the team. I wonder if Craig Conroy looks at that style and says, okay, that's a positive. That's something that would be an asset for Mitch Love in the interview process. So yeah, I think if Mitch Love ends up being head coach of this team, my expectation is that the way practices are done and the general feel at practice, and just with the team, there is an expectation that there would be a change for the positive.
I remember the first practice back at the Saddle Dome after Bill Peters and the team parted way and Jeff Ward was running things. Things had been tense up to that point, for not even surrounding the racism situation, allegations from other players like Jordan. Aside from that, practices had been tense. Like, that core group, I think they were kind of known for having like one coach lose their shit on them, like tossing sticks, swearing at them. That would always happen, like with each coach they had, going back to like Bob Hartley. But that first practice with Jeff Ward at the helm, they were playing music. And it was just, I remember like we'd all come to the rink and it's like, I wonder what they're going to play today. And Rasmus Anderson was usually the guy with the aux cord, but they were playing like Tiny Dancer and Benny and the Jets, and guys were having a ball. And it, for a time at least, it worked.
Yeah, it went on too long. And I would say, I don't like Mitch Love being, I've never heard anything about Kadri or Huberdeau not being receptive to coaching. I mean, I don't think. I
just wonder, because he's a young guy, he would be one of the youngest coaches in the NHL. Should he take that?
For sure. I honestly, I think he's borderline ready, and I think at some point you have to take a risk. But I also, like, I'm not totally on board with the idea that they should be going for the playoffs next year either, right? Like, I do think that this should be a development season, and I don't necessarily think that they need to be talking seriously about being.
But even if you just treated it as a development season, would they be bad enough to miss?
That's the thing.
Looking at like, because like Edmonton's still going to be there, LA's really on the uptick, Vegas is going to Vegas, but like Seattle's there, but there's still some pretty rotten teams in the Pacific.
That's it. Like, it's just in a different world where you don't have the Kadri,
if you're
the
in the
Huberdeau
Atlantic,
contract.
if you're in the Metro,
yeah,
like, yeah, man, take the development season, get the highest pick your franchise has ever had.
Think about this team finished 1 point above the Florida Panthers in the state. Like, I know people know this. This team is not bad enough where, all right, you say a development season, but this team is not bad enough to put itself in a position where it could get itself a proper lottery pick. And I don't know. I do not like the idea of running a team and just kind of hanging around and being in the mushy middle, which essentially Calgary is in right now. If I'm putting together a team, I want them to be good and I want them to compete. Even if I know a lot of people don't like the whole, hey, like put us in the playoffs and see what happens. I would much rather be in that boat than to be in the middle and be like, okay, I have no idea where we're going to go. We're just in no man's land. And if we're going to bottom out, we're going to be trash. I don't think this Calgary Flames team, as constructed right now, is bad enough to be trash.
I just think they're dangerous. Like it's getting dangerously close to being 3 or 4 years behind where Vancouver is in whatever cycle they're doing.
Yeah, it's just
like so close to bottoming out, and it's like, nah, man, let's go on a run at the end.
Connor Bedard is available, a guy who's from Vancouver who would have loved to be a Vancouver Canuck, and we're actually really sucking. Now let's hire Rick Tocchet and completely ruin that tank.
This is all why I specifically led with the 7 UFAs, because all of this is true. Huberdeau and Kadri are not enough. If you start dealing the Lindholms, the Tanevs, the Hannafins, maybe they won't be last place. But I'm actually not advocating for a tank. I'm advocating for a reset, a year where you say, okay, look, we're dealing Dan Vladar. I think we all know that the Flames are going to have to deal Vladar.
I think you consider that regardless if you're tanking or not.
Well, of course. I'm just saying you're starting there. Lindholm's not willing to resign. He says he wants some more time. Well, we can't give you more time. I think it was super cool that Craig Conroy openly admitted he wasn't prompted. He said, I got it wrong with Johnny Gaudreau. He's like, I won't let that happen again.
That was really powerful for him to say. And it pretty much assures.
He was on 960. Remember, in February of that year, I believe, saying, I'm completely confident Johnny Gaudreau was going to sign. He got it wrong. They let that asset walk for nothing. It never should have happened.
And it seems like, at least in the case of Johnny Gaudreau, it's not a situation where, I mean, at least from my vantage point, that he was trying to blow smoke and Johnny was just going to leave the whole time. It genuinely seems like Gaudreau, up until the very last minute, was considering his options.
Totally. And Conroy, clearly, that was enough for him to feel like holding on to Gaudreau and giving him that time and space and trying to sell him on the city, winning around, all of that.
Yeah.
He's not going to let that happen again. He said that. Like that, and that relates to Lindholm, that relates to all of this. And it's just why, what does next year look like? I disagree that if you're dealing with Lindholm, you should be looking for anything other than players who are going to be around for 6 or 7 years. I think that it has to be youth, and like realistically, you've got Markstrom for a couple of years, but if you feel like Dustin Wolf
can make an impact, and we're seeing that more and more now.
I mean, look, I remember I was on a radio show speaking with a reporter in Vegas before this season started, and him talking about how the goaltending situation meant that they were not gonna they were gonna be a disaster this year. Like we get these things wrong sometimes, and sometimes you just have young players who step up. I mean, that Vegas team was more ready than a lot of us realized. That Vegas team, to contradict myself directly, is exactly also what you would look at and say, well, actually, one bad year doesn't mean that you're out of it.
Here's the one thing, though, because that Vegas team also had a ton of injuries. They were playing through like 5 defensemen throughout parts of the year as well. But to your point, after they go through that year, which funny enough, they lose in a shootout to Chicago that, ultimately eliminates them. What do they do in the offseason? They fire their coach. They say goodbye to Evgeny Dadonov and Max Pacioretty. And then they add Phil Kessel, and I think Aiden Hill was also a newcomer this offseason as well. They didn't do that many changes. They just looked at their core and they said, okay, like, you know what? This was an off year. A lot of our guys were banged up. We're going to give ourselves another chance at this. And look at this. They're within a stone's throw of the Stanley Cup final.
So we also have to say thank you to, I believe, undrafted Calgary product, former Calgary Buffalo, Logan Thompson, helped get him there. Get well soon, Logan
He looked
Thompson.
like a Calder Trophy candidate this
He
year.
was insane that first game in Calgary this season. Goodness gracious.
So quickly, you are like, I am of the opinion that Dustin Wolf has done everything he has to do in the AHL. It is time to call him up next season. I think all of us, absolutely. I honestly, like, Dan Vladar might be my favorite Calgary Flame, to be perfectly honest with you, just as a person. But we're agreed that you kind of have to move on.
Here's the thing. The Flames are in a really unique position where, like, I think Dustin Wolf has done everything that he can to prove that, he should be getting NHL time. But the Flames are also, they don't have to call him up. Like, he's still waiver exempt for another, 2 years. They don't have to rush him if they don't want to. But also, like, I'm not sure what else Dustin Wolf needs to do, right? I get that Jacob Markstrom's there and he has a no movement clause. But even if he's just there as a backup and that's your way of easing him into NHL minutes, Like, and then after that, if he just continues to play well, then you change the role up for whoever's going to be your starting goaltender. Like, I really think Dustin Wolf has done enough to put himself in that position. But at the same time, like, I think maybe another training camp, you put him through more preseason games. If you're moving on from Dan Vladar, you're putting him in as your backup. Like, I hope people don't think this like, oh man, like he's so much better than Jacob Markstrom. Like, I think you do everything you can to ease him in.
You also need to look at Jacob Markstrom and say, like, okay, realistically, who is Jacob Markstrom as a goalie? Is he what we saw last season? Probably not. I feel like this was kind of like that blip that you got with Philip Grubauer, where it's like, oh man, like if Seattle even had like mediocre goaltending.
He was also better towards the end of the year.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he was picking it up. So I feel like he's going to do like the Grubauer thing, and he's going to bounce back. Like maybe he won't be Vezina candidate again, but serviceable.
And just so nobody listening or watching gets this wrong, I was not advocating for Dustin Wolf being the starter.
No.
Yeah,
and I didn't take that either. The biggest thing is for him to get called up so he can be a backup at this point. But I think there are people who would, there's probably a small faction of people who would be like, like Jacob Markstrom's trash, like put in Dustin Wolf as the starter. Like there are people who thought that the Flames should do that in the final stretch of the season for sure. But no, I think at this point, if you're calling up Dustin Wolf, it's for him to be a backup. And that's not a bad thing, I don't think.
And that's why, I mean, look, I'm not saying you got a ton for Vladar, but I do think like that would be as someone who has never developed an NHL caliber goalie. So I feel a little bit silly offering an opinion on this, but like that would sort of be my development.
I mean, never feel silly offering an opinion.
Well, there are things when it comes to like, oh, what do I think is best for Dustin Wolf's development as a goalie? Where I'm like, actually, like, no, this is different from me saying I think you should trade Elias Lindholm because you can get assets. No, I don't have a clue how to properly, but I do think Dustin Wolf being in the NHL environment, getting games in here and there, working with NHL coaching with Jacob Markstrom, to be perfectly honest with you, it sounds good.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know. This is the league MVP, the best goalie in the AHL 2 years running. Like, what more does he need to do to get like a shot playing NHL minutes, at least on some kind of consistent basis? What more does he need to do?
No, I mean, and I think that we've asked.
I mean, I think it's a situation that's applicable to a lot of players. Like another player, I guess, a different situation a bit, but Conroy was talking about Matthew Phillips because that was a player that he advocated for. He said,
he was my next question for the
Matthew. He said Matthew has done everything he can to prove himself at that level. Now it's just the opportunity. So the question is where the opportunity comes and when, and that will be one of the tough decisions that Craig has on his plate this year, and with whichever coach he decides to go with.
I think like Dustin, you're right. I think it's a different situation between Dustin Wolf and Matthew Phillips. Just with,
I think like the only similarity that I'm looking at there is they've done everything they can to prove themselves at the AHL level. Now it's just a question of opportunity.
Absolutely, yeah. And I will say this about Matthew Phillips. I think considering what he's done in the AHL, he should have gotten a longer look, especially this past year where they only got to play 2 games. He only got to play 2 games.
And what, 9 minutes a game?
Well, and you think if you go back to the bubble season when he actually made his NHL debut, he was so close to having his first goal in his first game. So close.
And it came in like a meaningless game. It was in that like Calgary Vancouver game where like the playoffs had already started.
The nothing bowl.
Yeah, the nothing game. I think Matthew Phillips should have gotten a longer look by the Flames at different points. However, I look at his size and I look at, not from a height standpoint, because there are guys as short as like Johnny Gaudreau who have totally made it work. But you know why Johnny Gaudreau is one of the best players in the world?
Because he's evasive for his
exactly.
size.
If you are trying to keep him in a corner, like, good luck. He will find a way out of that space. I've seen people on Twitter be like, hey man, Cole Caulfield has an NHL career and he's small. You know why Cole Caulfield is small? He has one of the best shots I have seen from as someone who grew up in Montreal and watched the teams come in year out. He might have the best shot I've seen from a Canadiens player. I've been alive almost 30 years. He might have the best shot I've seen from a Canadiens player. Like Matthew Phillips does not have that. He's not evasive. I admire the fact he goes to the net and he tries to. He's unafraid of putting himself in physical situations to get those goals. You have to put yourself there sometimes to do that. And to his credit, in the little bit of time he did get to play this year, he did try to go to the net and try to establish himself in that presence. I just have questions with regards to the frame that he has, the body that he has, and if he is able to make it work. I'm not saying it can't work, but I have questions.
Going to Wranglers games this year, and I love Matty Phillips as a person,
Absolutely,
his family. But talking to scouts at Wranglers games, they really do seem divided on whether the size is an issue.
He gets bumped by AHL defensemen. I don't want to see that personally.
Yeah, but that does make me think that because scouts are divided enough that there is more than likely an opportunity out there for him. And like Connie said, yeah, it's a gray area with Matthew right now. And again, like a player that I don't think any fans would begrudge him going out to try to get a shot.
Well, they'll feel that way. And then if he goes to a team like Tampa Bay and he turns himself into like a 15, 20 goal scorer, it's going to be like,
or if the Coyotes somehow get it together and Valimaki, Mackey, and Phillips take him to the promised land.
Bad asset management.
So with the Phillips question, I'm trying to segue into. Conroy said he wants there to be spots for young players.
Absolutely.
Let's go with basically including Ruzicka, but then other than that, the Wranglers playoff roster. So you've got Walker Dewar, you've got Jacob Pelletier, you've got
Walker Dewar is quick.
You know what's funny, actually, in all of this, in terms of getting opportunities for young players, I did not think of Walker Dewar because I just assumed like his spot was assured 100%. On that fourth line. And what's wild about this too is I think Brad Treliving at the trade deadline was like, you know what, man, we made Brett Ritchie expendable because Walker Dewar was pushing to be an everyday player. So I don't feel like we have to think about Walker Dewar
so
as
Dewar
a
is in. So Dewar is in.
I think he's in. I don't think we have to think about him at all.
We're not going to do the Rose thing because I don't know how to do it. But Matthew Coronado, is he on the NHL roster for 65 games next year?
65 games this year? Wow. Okay.
I could see him being in one of those spots depending on what they do with that bottom six, where it could be
he has a good shot too, man.
He does.
He's doing some good stuff at the Worlds too. Mm-hmm. He's producing.
That's what I mean.
I say yes. I think it's such a small sample size, that one game against San Jose, but he
got himself in positions, man.
He did. He made some good plays. There was like one really good play he did with Jacob Pelletier. Jacob Pelletier was kind of like spinning around, but he found a way to make a tweener pass. And then Coronado's just right at the side of the net. He has a really good shot and good offensive instincts. And if you're building out that bottom six and you're trying to give opportunities to young guys like that, I have to think Coronado gets a long look.
And I'm using 65 sort of as an arbitrary. Yeah. You're mostly in the team, but we're not saying you're playing all 82 or anything. So Pelletier?
Yeah. I think of all of the Coronado I feel confident about, but I think Jacob Pelletier, of all of the young players who are trying to get spots, I think I feel the most confident considering the NHL experience he gained this past year. I think after last training camp where he admitted that, he was off to a pretty bad start from rookie camp onward, I think he knows not to go through that again, and I don't think he'll repeat that. And I think there's a spot for him at least maybe to start as like a third line winger. Maybe he's shown already if you have to put him up in a situation where he could play with a Nazem Kadri, for example, he could make that work. I don't think we're going to see a situation again where him being bumped up to left wing is going to push Jonathan Huberdeau to the other side. But hey, he's shown he in a little bit of time, he was able to play up and down that lineup. And if they need to put him in those different situations in a pinch, he can do it.
So yeah, like maybe if you look at the roster, like maybe like a Cole Schwint and a Connor Zary are the guys who get a cup of coffee. Maybe like a Dryden Honey, who's pretty effective in playoffs.
I'm interested in Schwint, to be honest. I liked some of what I saw from him, but like we've got three. Cami, like where's Adam Ruzicka? Is he playing?
It's a weird one. I just never got the vibe that
there
was enough consistency there.
There was that little stretch of time.
Played on more lines. Like I feel like he played on first, second, and fourth.
Because remember, there was that time when it was Huberdeau, Lindholm, and Toffoli, and then he jumbles up the lines, and then he puts Ruzicka next to Lindholm. And after that first game they play where Ruzicka looks good, Daryl Sutter says it's important that Elias Lindholm likes who he's playing with. And he said that about Adam Ruzicka. Like, that's really interesting. And that's also a player in the past, too, not to bring up Daryl Sutter again, but he said that, like, his future is not on the fourth line. And whenever he's gotten those opportunities in the top six to play, he at least has shown some promise there. It's just consistency. And he'll say that too. Like, I know he doesn't speak that much when he talks to us, but if there's one thing he keeps reiterating is that he has to be consistent. And I don't know how he does it, but he's going to have to do it. But it seems like as a as a fourth line guy, whatever he's put there, it's just not a fit.
No, I feel like he needs to be playing with sort of offensive players.
Yes.
So I mean, so those three, so we're sort of unclear on Ruzicka. As you said, I agree with you that I don't know that Zary is ready for a bigger role, although he did. I mean,
that's why I'd say like a sniff.
The goal he scored in game 2 against Coachella Valley was like one of the sickest goals I saw all season. I super think he's still got, like, I'm not saying I'm giving up on him. I just don't know that it's next year. But there's no one on the defensive end like next year, really, right? We're expecting Shillington back.
Like the only person I could really think of who I think really has a chance would be Jeremy Poirier, but I think his defensive game still needs work.
Like the offense is there, but that was, the knock on him at the draft. That was something that we talked about this season where Mitch held him out a couple times. It was get the defensive part of the game together because like offensively, there's some really great things he can do.
Skill,
The alternate DeSimone and Milosh, like they had some good stuff, but I still don't know if that's enough to.
Like those guys would work as like depth defensemen.
Yeah.
And I feel as if the Flames are going to be pretty good at shoring up that part on depth, especially. I mean, it's funny enough. We're already thinking of the 7 UFAs for next summer. Michael Stone and Troy Stetcher are pending UFAs this summer.
Yeah.
And I think Michael Stone made it pretty clear he wants to be back. A lot of people, at least as far as I've seen, and I'm part of this camp too, I think I would try to re-sign Troy Stetcher. I think he did enough to at least consider keeping him as a 5 or 6.
I think he did enough that other teams will be sort of interested.
Who
might need him more than the Flames do.
That's
but again,
true.
A lot of this comes down like the 7 UFAs is the big question, because if you're considering dealing 2 or 3 of those guys because you're not sure, then you could sure use a guy like Troy Stetcher, right? So
and you alleviate cap space that way too, because right now they, as according to Cap Friendly, they're at like 1.25 mil in cap space, and of course that's with some other contracts like Peltier down the minors, but like that is not a lot of room to play with for this summer.
No. All right, is there anything else Flames wise that we feel like we need to talk about? I feel
I'd like to shout out, sometimes when people comment, I like to check out their elite prospects page to see, like, I think this is around the time where I told you, Danny, never to feel silly about having an opinion. I'm gonna go back to where was it? Calgary Flames win the cup with Iginla and Conroy. Jordan Stimson. We have a couple of Portage College vets in the chat here. Jordan, congratulations on your 21 games with Portage College. 0 goals, 0 assists.
I don't know.
8 PIMs. Thanks for your input, Stimps. Sorry, throw it out there.
Okay. I don't know what's going on, guys.
I don't know, man.
This was fun.
How did this
prediction
hour
for
fly
tonight?
by?
Do we get a sweep? Is Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Bennett taking them to the final? Is that going to happen tonight?
I think Sergei Bobrovsky does it, man. Sergei Bobrovsky takes them there, which of all people, Sergei Bobrovsky, who so many people labeled as washed heading into this postseason, of all people to go on this type of run, that is such a cool story. Such an amazing story.
I am dealing with the producer, so you guys just keep talking for a second.
Fine.
I mean, also, I will say, like, the thing I love as someone who grew up in BC, I am living for Roberto Luongo.
Yeah.
Just the reaction shots.
Oh, my God.
That's been very great to watch. The Panthers have been a lot of fun to watch, but, like, my heart breaks for Carolina a little bit because I wanted this to be more of a fight, and I get, like, 1-0 game.
Yeah.
That's a goalie fight to the end.
Yeah, but, like, I mean, not to kind of broaden it out here, but I will. Like, that series could end in a sweep. Dallas, Vegas very well could end with a sweep. I don't know if
it would be a more deserving sweep than the other, though.
Absolutely, but like in terms of at the beginning of the conference final, the big thing, at least I was on this side where it's like, all right, fine. You know what? It's these southern markets. This is an opportunity for people to tune into some great series, some great teams. I don't like the fact that they're both ending in sweeps. I mean, that's just how you play it. But like in terms of an entertainment value thing, like I like these series going 6 or 7. I'm pretty sure there are some rights holders who probably would have loved to have seen those games go a little bit more. If you're a fan of the NHL and the NBA, all but like one series in the conference final so far.
Bizarre that it's happening.
It's so weird. All but one series between both sports. It looks like it's going to be a sweep.
And I think that I think the advantage of the NHL, and this is sort of something I referenced with Ryan, and I think it was The Athletic that did a story on like Matthew Tkachuk is the league's breakout star.
Yep.
Like we all are like,
Yep.
oh, McDavid, whatever, all of that. Like within the American market, I mean, he is the guy you should probably be marketing around right now.
The talent, the presence, the
The
personality,
attitude,
He's got
the
good
yeah,
clothes.
personality is a better word to
all
use.
of it.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I know that sort of sucks for people in Calgary who may sort of still be feeling some hurt about the way he left. I certainly think it's something that the organization, I'm sure, has revisited a million times and being like, how did we lose this guy? Where did we go wrong? Because you're not supposed to lose those guys. But look, getting that guy in the Stanley Cup final right now, again, stinks that an hour down the road, Jimmy Butler and the Heat are probably, soaking up most of the media attention in the Miami area, but that's still big for the league. That's the pro to the con being that these series haven't been great.
That's fair.
And I honestly think that we're going to see like Matthew Tkachuk's the guy. Get him. And I'm actually not trying to like. This is just my I'm not trying to make a reference to my appearance, but like get him in GQ. Like legitimately though, like he is the guy to market around if you are this league right now.
He seems cool. Like I mean, we know about the family lineage with Brady in Ottawa, but also his dad Keith, who, by the way, maybe an unsung MVP for calling him out near the end of the year. And it seems that the Panthers have been a completely different team ever since. But just off of the personality, the type of player that he is, like, yeah, I think if you're the NHL, you're all in on that. And it seems like sometimes like a Connor McDavid, for example, like all world type of player. It's only now where he seems to have accepted this fact that he should be kind of putting himself out there beyond being a hockey player. And he's still kind of he's still kind of like a little bit of a stick in the mud when it comes to being a personality, especially in those commercials. I never got that sense with Matthew Tkachuk.
I will bring up, but just because we got a couple minutes, I apologize if you've talked about this on the show this week, Danny, but you also did a really good article a couple years back about Tkachuk and Tatum.
Yeah, that was a really good
yeah,
good on you for getting that.
That was what I will say about that is that was 2018. I am a basketball fan, so I happened to be in Boston for a UFC fight and sort of had a morning and asked if I could go to the studio. So I talked to Jason Tatum, shared some stories, came back, talked to Tkachuk, shared some stories, wrote a story up about it, was really proud about it.
As you should.
This is prior to 2019 when sort of basketball took off a little bit in Calgary. It did not go like nobody read that story. So it was really nice of Jermaine Franklin yesterday to shout me out and sort of draw some attention to it, because here we are 5 years later, and I actually think it's gotten more clicks in the last 24
Well,
hours.
tell us about if people haven't read it yet, go read it. But Danny, tell us about the story instead of the clicks.
It's it's about them both being in high school in the same class together. It was good. Guys, we are live in the Oodle Noodle studio. Local Love Delicious. Since opening their first store back in 2005, Oodle Noodle has been all flavor and just the right amount of weird. 2 locations, 1244 17th Avenue Southwest and in Airdrie at 105 Main Street North. I want to thank Julian McKenzie for coming in, talking Flames with us for the last hour.
Thank you for having me.
Thank Cami for honestly coming directly from BC.
I thought you weren't coming.
She made
it.
She made it. I want to thank
late.
Ryan Ballantyne for earlier coming in and talking Stamps and some hockey with me. This has been fun. Thank you, everybody. And well, I'm back Friday, so we'll talk to you then.
Thank you, Danny.